each one of you to the session on return to the workplace. This session has been organized under the aegis of HR and Women Expert Committee leadership. We like to specially thank Dr. Augie, Chairman of the Expert Committee, Ms. Lavanya, Co-Chair of the Expert Committee, and also Ms. Veena Gopalakrishnan, Member of the Expert Committee, for curating this session for the benefit of our members. And we hope that this session will answer some of the common questions about the workplace, readiness for employees to return to work, and to assist organization to adapt an effective return to work strategy. The session will be moderated by Ms. Veena Gopalakrishnan, Partner, AZB Partners. And today's session speakers are Divyaja, HR Director for Indian Johnson Controls, Ms. Rupal Sinha, Director IMFS Quest Group, Dr. Rupa, Clinical Psychologist and Physiotherapist, Mr. Nishant Ravindran, Employment Lawyer at ANZB Partner, and Dr. Augie himself to be the panelist. We'd like to also thank all the participants for joining today's session. As you are aware that Rupa, can we go to the etiquettes slide? Yeah. So the basic rule is request all of you to kindly mute your mic at all times, both the webcam and the speaker. And please post your questions in the query box. That will help us to answer the questions at the right time. Next slide. So now may now request our President, Mr. T.R. Parshuram, President and whole-time Director of Toyota Industries Engine, to kindly welcome the gathering and to take forward this. Sir, over to you, President.
Thank you, Prithvi. Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And special congratulations to Augustus and Lavanya for organizing this wonderful event. And many thanks to the speakers and panelists for sparing your valuable time to be with us for a very important topic, return to work. In fact, I'm wondering, have you returned to work? We are still returning to work. And the pandemic is still not very clear at this point of time. But nevertheless, I always look at this COVID as a great learning once in our lifetime. In fact, we never thought that in manufacturing we'll be able to work from home. And when this idea came, many people could not believe that they can work from home. But today, many organizations are able to very happily work from home. And many organizations have been able to reduce the indirect manpower by 50%, believe me or not. Because people thought that they're inevitable. I think by working from home, we realized that there's a huge potential to reduce the indirect manpower. And this Kaizens, whatever we did, it is permanent, which means we can horizontally deploy to many areas going forward, even after the pandemic. Especially the learnings that came from this pandemic is something amazing, because necessity is the mother of invention. So once you are put in the sea, you naturally will swim even if you don't know swimming. I think that's exactly what has happened. So many people could stretch beyond their normal limits, and creativity and innovation blossoms when you are in a crisis. What happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I think after the earthquake, Japan started from scratch. Today, Japan is unconquerable. They have done so much in technology, in terms of innovations, creativity. And similarly, I think this learning in many sectors, I would say. In fact, IT sector has been a boon, because today the rentals have become almost extinct, which means people are able to work from home. In fact, my daughter, who is in Google in the US, I think I'm told that their sister organizations and organizations, they'll continuously work from home maybe for many, many years to come. I don't know whether they'll return to working to the offices. Similarly, a lot of service sectors also got a fantastic, credentials because of this COVID. See, again, the challenges are too many. Again, the emotional challenges. Like, you don't see the workplace. Again, working from home for us also has been a difficult thing in the initial pandemic. But today, we are trying to do some alternate working, like alternate days we work. And, we try to have some kind of face-to-face discussion, alternate days in possible areas with some lot of precautions. Therefore, I could not say this is right, this is wrong. But all I can say is this pandemic has been a wake-up call for many of us. To cut a lot of frills, to adjust new innovations, to bring in a new workplace. And, we are also putting up a new project. I can share my own experience. At least I removed 30% of my indirect staff and they're put on the new projects. And I could reduce at least 10 to 15% direct manpower and use them for a lot of new areas. So this kind of cost reductions, I could not have imagined had the pandemic not been there. So this is a kind of a blessing in disguise, I would say. And again, caution is social distancing culture. See, we never thought that India, a country like India, would tune to the social distancing culture. When Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji called for a nationwide, lamp lighting and, praying, I think we thought it is something like Kaveri starting at Kurk in a very small drops of water. But coming to think of that, I think the journey we have taken, and today I think every person on the streets, at least their mask is hanging on the neck. To that extent, we can say. They don't wear the mask, but mask is definitely hanging somewhere. So that kind of a transformation has taken place in a country like India. I think thanks to this kind of creative suggestions by the top leadership, because definitely the way we have dealt this pandemic is unbelievable. Because starting from the scratch, we are trying to spread the awareness portion. Then the awareness is trying to sensitize and trying to make it as more of a cultural issue, which is going to take a little more time. But nevertheless, it has taught us a lot of good lessons. Again, coming back to work, it is something like a rocket entering the earth. The friction will be very, very high. Definitely, the workplaces won't be the same as before pandemic, right? A lot of emotional disconnects and a lot of changing points, be it the man, machine, material methods, management, people's thinking. So a lot of changes have happened in the last 1 year. So it's not going to be easy, but nevertheless, the journey is going to be new. And definitely the journey is going to be more enchanting and challenging. That much I can say. And I'm very happy that today we have a lot of experts to deliberate on this issue. And I don't want to take your time between now and the forthcoming sessions. So I wish you a very happy session. And once again, I thank all the panelists and Augustus and Lavanya for taking forward this wonderful session. Once again, my heartfelt thanks to all the panelists, Mrs. Veena, Mrs. Rupa, Mrs. Divya. Sorry that I'm not able to spell out the other names. Please apologize. Have a great time and God bless. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, President, for this wonderful welcome address you have done and then sharing your experience. And also like to thank President for taking out his time, with this busy schedule still coming down to address our members. That's really very encouraging for us, sir.
No, I'm
Thank
honored
you.
actually. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
honored.
Thank you.
Now, may I now request Ms. Veena Gopalakrishnan to take it forward, set the context, and also moderate the session for this evening. Over to you, Veena.
So, thank you, Prithvi, thank you, BCIC, for organizing this. Thank you, Mr. Parasuraman, for the insightful message. In fact, he set the context better than anyone else can. So, very grateful for that. So, when the pandemic started early March last year, it's going to be a year now. The most talked about webinar was working from home. Everybody spoke about, okay, what are the challenges? What are the stress points? What are the anxieties in connection with working from home? And 1 year after, I think it's a bit heartening, though difficult, to see that we're talking about getting back to the workplace. There were 1 year back, we're talking about how there were several organizations giving up their leases, talking about permanent work from home, and looking back, I think now we all feel a sense of a need for social reconnect, looking to meet our colleagues. Zoom is not possibly cutting it anymore, but and things are changing. We're going to keep going back and forth on this. So thank you so much for joining us this Thursday afternoon. I know it is a sleepy time in the day, but We hope that this conversation is going to be useful and enriching for all of you. And I'm super grateful to have, sorry, I'm super grateful to have my panelists here. I have Augustus, who we very fondly call Augie, who is the HR leader at IBM. He has over 2 decades of experience in the HR space, and in my opinion, he's a thought leader. He's a futurist. You can talk to him about the future of work endlessly, and he will have a lot to contribute. And he's quite ideal for this conversation because I think we discussed working from home a lot 1 year back, and now I'm sure he has very valuable insights on getting back to work, organizations, duty of care, etc. I have with me Divya Jha, who's the HR director for India for Johnson Controls. And she has a wealth of experience in translating business challenges into organizational strategies for managing talent. She's worked with GE Global Research, GE Healthcare, GE Enterprise Solutions, and Asian Paints before. Thank you so much, Divya, for taking time out for this. I'm sure we all have a lot to learn from you during this session. Then going alphabetically, I have Nishant, who's a senior associate and an employment lawyer at AZB & Partners. Nishant and I work together, and he's not just a wonderful colleague, but also an excellent employment partner, employment lawyer. And he's going to tell us all about the regulatory challenges associated with working from home, getting back to work, employer liability. And I think a lot of you have signed up for this webinar, keeping those to get some answers from Nishant. So yes, it's going to be a lot of people looking at you for answers, Nishant. Then we have Rupa. Rupa she's actually Dr. Rupa Kalahasti. She's a clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist with training and experience in Mumbai and the United States. She's doing work in the organizational space and in terms of personal mental health issues. She's also developed Enrichment, which is a novel psychological and social initiative to bring mental health in the forefront for non-clinical populations in India. So super grateful. She's going to be bringing forth insights around the mental health space, which I think is one thing that was spoken about a lot over the last year. So there were anxieties about sitting back at home, insecurities about getting affected by the pandemic, and all of that is and the pandemic is not gone, but a lot of us are still going out, and we have to deal with the fact that we're going to be exposed to the virus for a fairly long time to come. So we're looking forward to your inputs here, and more so from an organizational perspective. So here employers are looking to your suggestions and inputs on what is it that they can do for their employees from a mental health and wellness perspective. So I'm going to start with Nishant. First question here. Employers.
Sorry, I need to interrupt, okay? And I think everybody needs to also know who's Veena Gopalakrishnan. Veena doesn't need an introduction, no doubt, but Veena has been a very active labor lawyer, and she has worked closely with the corporate industry and the chamber, in influencing and shaping public policy in the area of labor relations. And needless to say, she has a lot of interests, and one of them is about socializing this whole thing about return to work. And with that, Veena, thank you so much for putting this together, for curating all the content, getting the panelists together, and making sure that what we are going to share here is relevant and has a lot of value in the corporations and as well as among our members, most of whom are present here. So thank you so much for it. And sorry about the interruption. Carry on.
No problem, Augie. Thank you so much. That was very kind of you. A quick note to all our participants who joined us. I'm sure you have several questions. We have slots sometime at the end of the webinar for Q&A, but I'm sure you will have several questions to ask. So please drop them in the Q&A box, and I will pick them up and address them to the relevant panelists. If you would like to ask a particular person about their opinions, views on any aspect, do let us mention that in the Q&A as well, and I'll have that picked up. Let's get started. Nishant's first question here for you. Can employers mandate employees to come back to work? And the question that we asked 1 year back was, can employers require employees to work from home? So in that context, could you just let us know about how much control does an employer have in terms of where an employee works out of?
Sure. Thank you, Veena, for the question. And like you said, I think through this pandemic, hopefully we're coming a full circle now and things are getting a lot better to actually see people return to work and actually people looking forward to returning to work. So that's a great thing. Now, in terms of an employer mandating employees to return to work, there are a couple of things before we get to the short point of the yes or no. There are a couple of things which an employer has to keep in mind. One is that the government has been issuing notifications, regulations, and guidelines from time to time, as recent as, say, Feb 13th, about the things that employers should keep in mind and the steps and strategies which they should adopt in terms of mitigating risks to exposure of COVID-19. So these are some things which an employer has to keep in mind. Now, keeping all this in mind, the short point is that an employer, given the fact that he's requiring employees to perform certain types of work, has the ability to mandate employees to return to work. Now, an employer can go ahead and do that, but if he or she is doing that, or the organization is doing that, they should keep in mind that there are certain considerations that they should think of before actually requiring employees to return to work. And one of the biggest considerations being is that employers and organizations should thoroughly study the regulations and guidelines which they're supposed to put in place if they actually do have employees returning to work. And another aspect, which is not so much a legal aspect, which employers should think about, is now, given just the duration of the pandemic and the lockdowns, a lot of employees are no longer, say, in the same city as the office. A lot of them have gone back to their hometowns. So the way in which employers would require employees to return to work is something that I would think they should have more of a humanitarian and social understanding of. So it shouldn't be so much as mandate, but understand the requirement of the workplace and try and balance that with the requirement of, say, employees who may not be able to return to work too quickly because of various constraints, say they are not in the same location or travel is difficult, or other things like there might be a sudden spike in COVID cases around them. So these are some of the things which I think the employers should keep in mind. But in summation, I think an employer can require employees to return to work.
Excellent. So, well, if they can ask employees to return to work, what is it that you believe are the key legal risks that employers should be mindful of when they're requiring their employees to come back to work? Should it be in a phased manner? Can it be? Can we ask everyone to come on the same day? What are the consequences of such discussion?
So, Veena, like this pandemic itself, the situation which a lot of organizations are now facing now is a situation which is almost completely new. I mean, the world hasn't seen something like this, where at one point you've required almost your complete workforce to stay away from the office and work from home. And now it's the complete opposite, where you're looking to have people return to work. So in terms of risks, I mean, I would think that there are a couple of risks which employers should be mindful of. And there are a couple of best practices that employers should keep in mind in case there are any further risks. Now, in terms of the risks of returning to the workplace, I would say the biggest risk is just the human cost of having employees possibly contract COVID and potentially pass it on to other employees, or say I would say unknowingly infect other persons. So the biggest cost is that. Now, in terms of a legal risk, if I would have to break it down, there are primarily, in my mind, at least a minimum of 4 risks which employers should keep in mind. One is that there's a risk of employees claiming for compensation. I mean, this is something which has been untested in courts, but there is scope for employees to claim compensation for, say, getting infected with COVID when they return to work. Again, the framework around this has been legally untested, but Indian laws such as the Employees Compensation Act, etc., have potential to be interpreted to allow for this kind of compensation to be granted. Also, there are things like, say, tortious claims where employees can claim negligence on the part of the employer and requiring them to return to the workplace, because of which they may have contracted COVID-19. The second aspect which employers should keep in mind is the risk of them not fully adhering to these regulations or the government guidelines. Now, like the pandemic, which has been evolving continuously, government regulations as well have been evolving continuously, and it's pretty difficult to keep up with, especially, say, for employers who may not have a dedicated resource to track such notifications, etc. Now, in terms of these notifications, guidelines have been issued based on the amount of, say, the infection rate, the stage at which the pandemic is, things like that. So there have been points at which where these guidelines have been relaxed, and there have been points at which they have been actually enforced much more strongly. Now, what an employer wouldn't want to do is get caught sleeping by, say, government authorities. Say if there's a sudden inspection and employers are not aware of certain guidelines, such as, say, requiring staggered working, requiring sanitization on entry, requiring temperature checks. And if an employee gets caught sleeping with that, at that point of time, it could expose him to penalties under the relevant legislation, which is the Disaster Management Act and the Epidemics Act, based on the state in which they're located. So, and also what this could help is, not so much help, but what it would do is, if an employee actually gets infected with COVID, this would add as an argument to their claim for compensation, saying that the employer has not adhered to these guidelines. The last two aspects which I think employers should be aware of is one, that their obligation to ensuring safety doesn't only go to their workers. They also have contract workers. And now, under the law in India, which is the Contract Labor Regulation Act, basically what it says is that the contractor is supposed to ensure a certain level of safety for their contract workers. Now, if they fail to do so, it becomes the obligation of the principal employer, which is the organization or the employer itself. So now, if they get infected, again, it hasn't been tested, but there may be potential for them to claim, say, compensation from the employer, or require that the employer foot bills, etc. So this is something which the employer should keep in mind. And the last two things, which is something which really shouldn't have changed, but in practice has, is in terms of the statutory responsibilities of employers otherwise under normal laws. Now, things like the Maternity Benefit Act requires employers with a certain number of employees to have creche facilities. If you're requiring employees to work in the night shift, you're supposed to provide transportation. Now, from a practical aspect, a lot of employers have approached the return to work in a staggered or phased manner. But something which employers should keep in mind is that even if they are having employees return in a staggered manner, these benefits which they're supposed to provide statutorily are some things which they should keep in mind from the beginning. Now, your obligation to provide creche facilities exists if you have 50 employees who are employed at the establishment. Now, you might require, say, 5, 10, 20 employees to return to work. But your obligation in terms of providing such facilities to these 20 employees doesn't get negated by the fact that you're not working at full strength. So this is something which employers should keep in mind. And my last thing, which I think employers should keep in mind, is just in terms of respecting the privacy of their employees, both law and just both statutory law as well as judge-made law requires that you protect certain level of privacy. So employers should be mindful when asking employees to disclose medical conditions. They in turn disclosing these medical conditions to, say, fellow employees. You'd have to think about things like stigmatization at the workplace, potential discrimination. So I would think these are the key considerations which organizations should keep in mind.
Thank you, Nishant. This is extremely valuable. But I'm going to go to Divya here and ask her, what is it that you believe are the basic minimum requirements in terms of workplace readiness? Nishant has told us what is it that we need to keep in mind from a legal and statutory risk perspective. But going into it, I think we also need to look at it from a human resource and a humanitarian perspective. So what, in your view, are the basic minimum requirements that anyone who wants to get started with and require employees to come back to the workplace, what is it that they need to keep in mind?
So I think this has been a sort of a unique opportunity for employers to relook at how they want to approach the future of work. Right, we've got this kind of, in a sense, a breather, right? A time where our employees have all been out of the office. So it's been a time for us to really rethink, and I think someone talked about the fact that we couldn't have imagined that we could have nearly 100% of our workforce working from home, and we did do that, and we have large percentages still working from home. So I think it's very important for employers to really think about what do they want, because we have that breathing space to think through what our strategy should be and then how we execute it. We're still not really ready very quickly to bring people back, or most people back to work, right? So we still have a little more time. So, this whole thing of do you really want, at whichever point in time, 6 months, 9 months, 3 months, do you really want to bring everybody back? You've proved to yourself that you don't need to, right? Senior leadership who never thought that people can work from home today believe that they've seen with that even things like customer service, voice sort of people, people who work on voice, shared service centers, everything's been able to work from home. So really, who do you want to bring back to work? Do you want to bring people back, or everybody? Or do you are there certain kinds of roles, obviously, that do need to come back to work 100% of the time? All of our factories are working today. So, we brought back our manufacturing workforce very early on in the pandemic, right? So that's one kind of, or there are people who need to use lab spaces, etc. Product development, that kind of thing. So these are people who have come into work and will need to continue to work from, their workplace. But there is a whole large population out there that we don't need to bring back to work. So I think employers need to look at, what are those kind of roles, which roles really, do need to come back at least for some part of the week or the month. So I think there's going to be a large population that I think most companies will look at, which will come into work perhaps for some part of the week. So depending on how much time you need them to be in office for for innovation, team building, community sort of spirit and so on. Culture, I think someone talked about culture is so critical, right? So there's going to be that, and then perhaps there is a set of people who may not want to, whose role allows them to work permanently from home. And today you can actually allow that. That's going to allow you to, have a much larger talent pool. We were just having a conversation, I think 2 days ago, with our global team, saying that today, roles, can really, I mean, any, what are called headquarter roles. The whole paradigm is now different. You can look at anybody across the world for what, at least informally were known to be headquarter roles, and really you had to think about the expenses, etc. So anyway, point being that it's going to expand your talent pool. You're going to be able to bring in a lot more diversity, whether regional or gender or whatever. So really, that's, I think, to summarize that particular point, I think it's really important for us to know who we want to bring back and in what way and for how much of that time. So I think that's really the starting point. Obviously, when you to bring people back, there are, I think, things. There's obviously the whole, the physical protocols, if I may call them that. What are your, how, we've actually reconfigured our offices, right? We've actually, to ensure that there's a physical distancing. Otherwise, it was all about space and cost. And, so you really had people sitting, very close to each other. All of that has had to change, right? So we've actually physically reconfigured our offices to create that space, to create, how do you have these walkways where you only walk one direction? You've obviously, we've mandated masks in the office. There is a whole entry protocol, whether it's Arogya Setu, or whether it's temperature screening, or whether it's sanitization, blah, blah, blah. So all of that, I'm sure, this group is very familiar with. So there is that whole aspect. I think I won't call it new, but I think there's just this greater focus on health. It just came to the forefront, right? We've always had lots of initiatives around health, but I mean, at least I can say that for our teams, I think it's really gone up by to a whole new level. So a lot of programs. So, for example, we had never thought about flu vaccinations earlier ever, and this is the first year, end of last year, that we actually sponsored with our own budgets flu vaccinations for our employees. Things like that. We are at this point in time thinking about what should be our strategy for the COVID vaccine. We're waiting for, what the government regulations are going to look like, and, how we can partner to prioritize our populations, all of that. So vaccination strategies. The other, I think, big thing, which, and I think, Rupa, you're going to talk a lot about that, is mental health. And I think that's something, again, I can speak for our organization. We did not have it was not front and center for us. So we took the opportunity, this whole last 1 year, we took the opportunity to actually design and create an employee assistance program. We funded it. We got, and we actually rolled it out. So we've now got, a very, very strong partner that we've signed up with, and not just our employees, their family members as well can now avail of counseling, facilities, and also a lot of related information, communication, engagement around emotional and mental health. So, I don't know if I've kind of talked too much, but to me, these are some of the key aspects of if we are thinking about bringing people back into work.
Thank you. That was extremely insightful, Divya. And I think it's really actually heartening to see that organizations have been resilient during the pandemic. Not only have they been resilient, but they've also learned to be more thoughtful. They worked around. They worked in a way that makes it meaningful for employees to survive the pandemic. So I think that's great. I think this is definitely an opportunity. This has been an opportunity for organizations to be more thoughtful about employees. There used to be a time when employees were resources, where you come, you do your work and go. But these aspects being spoken about, being considered as part of policy initiatives is just fantastic. I have with me Rupal Sinha, who had a little difficulty joining in, but I'm super grateful that she did make it. So Rupal is the Chief Executive Officer of the Integrated Facility Management Services at Quest Corp, which all of us know is India's leading business service provider and largest private sector employer. So she deals with lots of employees, and I'm sure she has plenty to say in terms of get return to work, working from home, all of these aspects. Rupal, I was wondering if you could also share your views on what you believe are the basic minimum requirements in terms of workplace or employer readiness. And I'm sure these are things that you've seen evolve for a very long time. Have you been working from office? I think Quest has been working, has been back to work for a very, very long time now. You're on mute, Rupal. Sorry, you're on mute. BCIC team, if you've muted her, can you unmute her, please?
She has to unmute herself, Veena.
Up there on the right, there should be a blue button on the top right side.
Okay, Rupal, I think what we'll do is...
Yes, Ms. Rupal Sinha, there is a mic icon that you have
actually, Rupa, why don't you call her separately and guide her on this? I think we will we will go ahead, and once Rupal's microphones are sorted, we can come back to hear her inputs on this. I'm going to go to, yes, one of the basic minimum requirements that Divya mentioned was in terms of mental health. So, Rupa, you are the best person here to talk about, one, what are the mental health implications that you've come across ever since the pandemic hit, that is since March, where from what I know, and I know very, very little on this, is there were isolation anxieties when people were asked to stay back at home. There were space issues. There were things that most of us did not even think about, forget empathize with. And now when employers are suddenly saying, get back to work, there are other insecurities and fears that people are having. So if you could tell us what is it that you are seeing, because you have the pulse in these things, and how is it that employers can really help you?
Right. Thank you, Veena. And I think Nishant and Divya made like very important points touching upon some of these aspects. One of the things that I've been observing or like having conversations with my clients across the pandemic time across India and the US has been, like you mentioned, the isolation anxiety, not being able to meet with like their co-workers, their families, being isolated in spaces that don't give them access to work from home. And the other piece is also there's a diversity of experience, right? Like we may not really anticipate that someone might go back to a place where they may not have internet or they may not have access to these different things that is necessary for work from home. So that is definitely a piece that's come up. The other piece is also with respect to trauma, right? Like you're stuck in an environment with your thoughts, with not really having an outlet for these thoughts and feelings. So a lot of like we've seen an uptick in terms of the domestic violence cases going up. We've seen an increase in terms of people reaching out for trauma focused counseling and things like that. So these are certain focus areas that have come up. I also feel like being social animals, the connectedness is seen as a protective factor for a lot of people. So there have been an increase in terms of passive suicidal ideation. So just the isolation can lead to, your thoughts jumping to these, I would say, like scary conclusions and things like that, which I think are important to take into consideration. One of the things that I've heard from like people who've been working from home often is that it feels like supervisors, managers, employers continue to expect them to function at a pre-pandemic level, even though the pandemic is going on. So the discrepancy in terms of their emotional experience of the pandemic as compared to their supervisors saying, we have productivity expectations from you, you need to turn in these deadlines, you need to, continue working at that optimal level of functioning. That expectation is something that's been stressing most of my clients out. And I think that's something that probably all of you who are in the industry are hearing as well. So also kind of thinking about our managers, employers, people in authority living in a parallel world where the pandemic doesn't really exist, as compared to the employers who are feeling the if as compared to the employees, sorry, who are feeling the effect of the pandemic interfering with their productivity. Another quick thing that I wanted to point out was with respect to the work-life balance, right? Like that line has been blurred so much during the pandemic, with people not being able to separate. They have like kids, family members, if they're living with their family, a lot of that coming into their work time, as well as their work infringing upon their personal time or their, like just their life in that sense. So that line has been blurred. And now thinking about recreating that boundary when they get back to work in terms of the physical space, but also the mental space, like switching between these two, having more time to focus on your work and more time to focus on your family, on your personal lives. So these are some of the things that have been coming up in sessions and that I think have been in conversation, like even Divya pointed out, with you know companies being more mindful of what kind of struggles people are experiencing. Um, in terms of the positive note, I feel like the conversation of mental health coming to the forefront during the pandemic is definitely helpful. People are reaching out for resources, people are reaching out for support and help. So I do think that is a positive that we are seeing in our like industry. But on the other hand, I would say the negative effects are something that people will carry on with while returning to work, because it is going to take them time to kind of go back to pre-pandemic zone.
Thank you, Rupa. And you mentioned a very interesting thing about pre-pandemic expectations, and it's interesting because before March 2020, working from home was mostly something that young mothers were allowed to do. And a lot of women I know have made this statement saying working from home is really hard because it's double the effort and half the credit. And I think one thing that we've learned during the pandemic is, or one thing that's happened is everyone got exposed to the work from home thing. And yes, it has its conveniences, but it does come with a significant cost as well. You're mixing, you're blurring those boundaries between work and home comes with a huge cost. That horrible traffic from home in Bangalore to your office sometimes feels welcome because it helps you disconnect from work or disconnect from home. But now moving on, Augie, I understand there's a duty of care that every organization has towards its employees. Now, when we open our doors and say, okay, we believe it's time to have employees come back to work, when the pandemic is as raging as ever, vaccines are only being rolled out slowly, and surely there is an expectation that it's going to demonstrate its duty of care. You're on mute, Augie.
Thank you. I lost about 10-20 seconds of your question because I think there was an audio impact. But anyway, I will do justice to it. So duty of care, right? Now, before that, we did speak about the various things, the future of work. And today we're already in the future. We're not talking about the future of work. We're already in the future. We have, in the last 9 months, experimented with what I call the new ways of working, which is a highly digital and virtual talent management practice, which all of us have been able to, get used to. But the duty of care never changes, all right? And what is it? It's basically a moral and legal obligation for an employer to ensure the safety and security of their employees. Okay, so health being on top of this whole thing. All right, what is the responsibility of the employer there? Especially when the employee is not coming into the office. All right, and they are in distributed work environments. Okay, and the way I say it is that it's not just about employee health and safety. It's also about enabling that employee to be productive. Okay, and therefore, do you have the right things in place? For that, let me give you an analogy, right? In the sense that organizations, we typically educate our employees and prepare them for the perfect storm. You and I also train ourselves, to be ready when the perfect storm hits us. And now what happened in March was that the perfect storm hit us, and all our learnings, whether it is competencies or skills or values, they all came to the fore. But you know what? This entire storm that hit us, made sure that we were in our separate boats. We were in one storm, but we were in separate boats. And therefore, it becomes so difficult to ensure that each of those employees' boats is rigged with the right things, right tools, right systems to ensure that they're able to ride the storm. And at the same time, communication. All right. So there were a few things that came to our mind here, right? One is, how do we ensure that we come out of the storm unscathed, and also how do we ensure that this learning through this COVID pandemic helps us? Now, first of all, we said, look, let's recognize the home and the office. Okay, so I would say that today we have a new house guest, and that's the office. What is a house guest supposed to do? If you're a house guest somewhere, you're supposed to behave well. You're supposed to, apply yourselves to the rules, responsibilities, and systems of that house and behave as a guest. Whereas in a lot of cases, we've made sure that, the home is converted into an office. And that shouldn't happen. All right. So the first thing is that employers need to be very cognizant of the fact that you don't go and convert people's homes into offices. You make sure that the employee is equipped, maybe with an ergonomic chair or a desk or headphones and so on and so forth, and has some, a dedicated internet speed or a separate dongle or something like that for the person to work from home. Because we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are children also who are doing their online education from home, and there is a constant battle for the best part of the room of the home where you get better signal, right? And I usually lose in this at home. Okay, so I got myself a separate connection, and I don't share that password. So employers have to equip their employees to be productive at home. Then comes work-life integration. All right. Now, home is there, office is there. We were talking about work-life balance. How quickly can I leave office and go back home, spend time with my kids' homework, or take the family out for an ice cream and things like that. How do we improve? But today it is work-life integration. Work-life integration is what? Okay, that I am not available all the time because I'm working from home and I have a lot of other things too, which means that when I am on this call with you is when Amazon, Flipkart, and Big Basket, decide to deliver that package to me. And they will have that incessant ring of your doorbell. And you have to plan for it. You have to excuse yourself and go. So whoever is at the other end of the line needs to understand and build tolerance. So being tolerant of the other person's limitations working from home is also very important. That brings me to a question of resilience. So going back to that storm, what did we learn over these 9 months? It was about being resilient. And today, the workforce that we are having is about being resilient and how we can bounce back. Now, God forbid we have another storm like the COVID. Do we have it in us? Okay, so today organizations, as part of their business strategy, ensure that employees are built with that resilience. Now, it doesn't end there. Do we have systems and processes that can be resilient, that can be deployed, that can be ripped off, that can be updated and upgraded? Well, that's the other thing, right? Technology enablement. Okay, then comes all those other things at the employee situation, right? How engaged are they? Do you have a barometer to measure people's wellness? All right. And I have to tell you that, today, people who work from home, we have a multi-generational workforce at home, right? You have grandparents, your parents, your children. Now, what happens, right? Families are the best places, where conflicts emerge. And families are also the best places that solutionize those conflicts. All right. So it's so important for us to get the entire family to understand what is that mental equilibrium. I wouldn't, equilibrium is not the right word, because I think we're all somewhere, on the spectrum of mental health. Okay. But how do we make sure that when somebody else is, showing signs or not showing signs of suffering or depression, that we are able to identify those signs and create a system, with employer, with EAP and various other things to ensure that the duty of care is clearly fulfilled. Lastly, I want to also say that flu shots. I think the Divya said that ensuring that people taken their flu shots, and then when life changes, which means somebody could be infected, somebody's loss of life. There have been a lot of deaths that we are seeing during this time. So so those are also mental impacts, emotional impacts upon people, and therefore we'll have to make sure that do they have the appropriate level of grief counseling? Are they able to handle it? Then came that other situation of workplace harassment, domestic violence. And somewhere I saw the data some time ago, and the cases of domestic violence was low. And I said, no, this data is completely wrong, because where are people going to go and report it? We were in lockdown and people were, having a tough time at home. And even the lines of the women's helpline and things like that, they were down. Volunteers couldn't go to the office to man the phones. So therefore, going by data that DV is down is a misnomer. Okay, we have to say that we created the perfect situation for these things to happen. All right. And therefore workforce sensitivity in all these areas is so much important. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Augie. And resilience itself is so hard. And I think one step to resilience is for each of us to understand our own vulnerabilities and empathize that others have similar or vulnerabilities that are far more serious or far more impactful. And I think that is the only way to coexist, especially in times like these. But when we have Rupal, I'm going to ensure that we do get to hear her thoughts also on this. And I understand, Rupal, that you all have been working from office, from the workplace for a while now. You probably have your systems and processes in place for a while now. So I'd really like to hear from you on what you believe are the basic minimum requirements in terms of workplace readiness during the pandemic, during these times when we're hopeful about getting out of the pandemic. What is it that organizations should look and learn from you?
Yeah, thank you so much. And apologies, I don't know, something went wrong with the technology. So
it always
yes, you're
happens.
Right. So yeah, so predominantly we were classified and people who are in facility management and rendering facility management, which is part of security and facility people on ground. Government recognized us during these pandemic time to be essential services because our people had to be on the ground, and especially counseling these people, direct staff, associate, field staff on the ground who were basically deployed on healthcare, hospitals, and manufacturing never stopped, banking never stopped, e-commerce went on absolutely sporadic, high. So, and people working from home, so they needed logistic support to get their work from home facilities laid up. So my team, our associates on ground, 80,000 people were always constantly working, and it was so very difficult We had to counsel them day and day, ensure that they don't their hygienes had to be protected. Monitoring was absolutely super high to ensure that the clients also get what they want and our team is also protected. Having said that, yeah, it's important that first and foremost, every organization should not make COVID as a goal. Please make a sustainable solution, which today it is COVID, tomorrow there will be something else, but create a sustainable solution which is important for yourself, your employee, and the visitors who are coming to your workplace. First and foremost thing, is in the entire workplace, and this is what we have gone and given to our customers, is to ensure a proper indoor air quality. If you have a proper maximum people, if you go through this various statistics, we don't catch problem in outdoor air quality. It's the maximum you find that diseases brew maximum when you are indoor. Many people you will see, they say that we have a healthy lifestyle, we eat healthy, we have all good habits, and yet you find them with disease. This happens when the indoor air qualities are not well maintained. You may walk up in an office and you find that the office is phenomenally decorated, but it may so happen that the air quality is not properly maintained. So first and foremost, please look at the air quality, which is important. You must ensure that your employee and people coming to your organization ensures to get a PM 2.5 air quality. It's not a very large investment, but there are a lot of people who are now functioning in these fields. Ensure that that is given. The second, important element is washroom hygienes. There are a lot of automated solutions today, and it's very important that the moment if there are any virus generation more than capability limits, that's entirely taken care of. The third thing we request for every employer today is to have an app, or even through manually who can't afford, it's a very simple app to have a workflow, people flow management. So once you have, because we still haven't come out of this pandemic, I'm sure each organization has reworked on their workplace requirement. There has been shrinkage into the workplace. Many people have hived off many offices. So it's very important that once you have taken a decision of people who would be working from home and or coming, or there will be a flexible hours, it's very important that you control it with a very scientific manner. And we have that app. Our people daily, they have, including myself, I have to generate a batch before I come to the office. Even if I'm coming every day, that's mandatory for everyone. People who are traveling, you need to track their travel pre, post. Third thing is, constant counseling, because at this moment when people are hungry for information, cyber attacks is the maximum that is happening today. So it's very important before they go on those social media sites to look for information, you go out and your counseling team, your HR team, your admin team, or whichever setup in which you are, where people go and communicate, who are your front runners in your organization, who constantly communicate with the organization. If it is marketing, I don't know. So each organization will have these corp communication team. They must have a constant touch with the employees. And in spite, apart from that, the counseling, this COVID has also brought a lot of, loss of jobs around, and domestic violence. I heard very briefly on domestic violence. It has been on the ever rise in these pandemic time. I don't have the outright statistics, but yes, it has been ever rise ever since, this pandemic has started. It has really multifold in itself. And we have gone ahead counseling our team, at the ground level, at the associate level. We have conducted counseling session through NGOs to various other organization. And please, that is something you must make aware to the people, not only about these situations we are in, the hygiene levels that we must have, and how to respond if there are these losses coming within your family, affecting you, your spouse, your children. your friends and families. So this may not translate into any financial numbers, but these are very, very important human quotients which must be protected and given utmost importance by every organization. The other thing, the two other elements which each employer must look at, if you're offering catering services or food services, you make sure that if you have on-site pantry services, minor investment in terms of just buy a small UVC cabinets, so that you sterilize the food or tea or coffee or water before you're serving to your employees. Same UVC cabinets can be used for any stuff which is coming inside your building, inside your office, be it your couriers, be it your laptops. It's a small investment. Your mask can be sterilized again. You can reuse that. Please go ahead and implement these small little things, and they are not. Please don't make it COVID, related. These are sustainable solution you must implement for all times to come. Lastly, and for on-site kitchens, people, industrial, belts who have on-site kitchens, or the pharma industries who have on-site kitchens, again, small investments, in terms of before the food is being served, or when the food is being taken inside, the raw materials are taken inside. Just cask it through a UVC solution, and you're done. Water treatment. There are plenty of things. We are more than happy. We do these free services these days to educate the clients, to how to make little investment or little moderation into your organization to provide safety to people. If you are encouraging people to come back to the offices, or your work, or the sector that you are in is requiring you to have a full strength on ground. Last but not the least, transport facility. That's the maximum problem we are facing. When we looked at the statistics, companies which have their transport facilities, we saw that maximum problem is happening there. Or even if you have done your workplace sterilized, what happens during the transport to and fro from the office is something still unattended. So constant education to people. People should change their mask every 3 hours. They should carry reusable masks and change them every 3 hours. That's the way. Wash it, in a warm soap water, and it's good to go. Put it into a UVC cabinet, and it's back to normal. You can use it again. So these are small little things. We have been saying, prepping all our customers and within our own organization. I'm sat in my office. My office has complete indoor air quality is PM 2.5. No virus can come at least inside this. So we have secured all these things. This is what we expect, and we support all our viewers today and people who are listening here. Please take it as a takeaway. You want our team to come and explain it to you. We are more than delighted and happy to put people around to take it more offline in a much detailed manner, and happy to support that. So I think these are a couple of things, daily, with small investments that you should incorporate while, now coming back to the normal. When you're doing it, still the vaccines are far away. So during that time, how you offset, your work pressure, your compulsion of bringing people back to the workplace, and to ensure that they are healthy at all time, and hygienically and sanitized completely at all times. So I think these are a couple of tips I would offer.
This is incredibly useful, Rupal, and I'm quite certain you will see a lot of people reaching out to you for guidance on best practices. And it is so interesting to see that a lot of organizations who were categorized as essential services, they had to work through the pandemic from workplaces. A lot of us had the privilege to work from home and just watch news and feel anxious about it, but they actually had to be on the front line, had to brave going to work, put them at risk. And that has also resulted in such incredibly thoughtful initiatives. A lot of organizations, I'm sure, have not thought about a lot of things that Rupal said, and it is brilliant to have her have this checklist to say this is the also really nice to see that organizations are now putting employees first. It used to be clients first, it used to be deliverables first, it used to be work first, but now it's about employee health and safety first, which is excellent. This whole conversation would be incomplete if we did not talk about vaccines. And are you all able to hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So excellent. Okay.
Sometimes
so I'm going to.
Yeah, now it's okay, but we were losing you here and there. But carry on.
Okay, great. So what I said in the last 20 minutes was essentially my thanks to Rupal for having such insightful suggestions for all of us. The conversation would be incomplete if we do not talk about vaccines. The government has announced that starting March 1st, they will start rolling out the vaccines for senior citizens and individuals above 45 who have comorbidities. The timelines, etc., will be announced in due course. But it does seem like vaccination is a near possibility. It's going to be something that we are all going to be able to access very soon. I'd like to hear each of your thoughts from your respective area of expertise on one, whether vaccination can be made a prerequisite for employees. I know, and it is important for all of us to know that the government has clearly said that vaccination is voluntary, but that's from a government perspective. But from organization perspective, is it something that organizations can enforce on employees? So maybe we could have Nishant, Divya, Augie, and then Rupa.
Thank you, Veena. So, like you just said, the Ministry of Health and Welfare has come out clearly as part of the FAQ saying that the vaccination itself is voluntary, and this is more in light of, I'm guessing, general fears and I would say more things like considerations that people had around, say, the safety of the vaccine and things like that. Now, in terms of an employer, the employer has the ability to determine conditions of work of employees, as in determine certain requirements or qualities that employees should have when they're supposed to work for a particular organization. And just taking off from this, there is a possibility that the employer may be able to tell employees that, listen, you're going to be working with other employees. My job is not to only listen to your concerns, but also generally ensure safety of the people who are working around you. And from that, possibly require employees to take vaccinations. Now, like with most things with COVID, this is something which we haven't seen in the recent past to actually know how courts are going to deal with this and how, say, labor authorities are going to deal with this. But at least one of my first initial thoughts is now an employer can go ahead and tell employees that, listen, you're supposed to take your vaccine. You have a duty towards your fellow employees. And me as an employer, I'm coming out with a policy where I'm telling you that because of XYZ reasons, take a vaccine and it will generally keep you safe and the people around you safe. Now, the major concern is what can an employer do if an employee refuses to take a vaccine? Now, just given the whole fact that this is a vaccine which is being made and has been developed relatively fast, people have their apprehensions about the vaccine. A lot of employees would genuinely refuse it. It may not be so much as not wanting to take the vaccine, but they're just maybe scared of taking the vaccine and things like that. So from that standpoint, I would think that it would be a stretch to say that an employer can initiate, say, severe disciplinary action if an employee refuses to take a vaccine. I would say the employer would have to approach it more from, say, a human resource aspect rather than a legal aspect, by, say, allowing an employee who genuinely has a fear about the vaccine to, say, work from home a little longer, try and assuage these fears a little bit, and then potentially see after a particular point of time, do a check with with the general employees, and then have them potentially mandate the vaccine or require that employees strongly require that employees take a vaccine and things like this. But I would say that it's a little difficult to say if an employer can actually initiate disciplinary action, but the employer can require their employees to take a vaccine.
Thank you, Nishant. And I think this is true of any kind of vaccine. Could be a flu vaccine, it could be any other kind of vaccine. And a lot of people come with varied belief systems around taking vaccines. In India, a lot more people automatically take vaccines. It's not as there are not as many opinions, but in other jurisdictions, in the US, there are several people with very strong views and very strong belief systems on the vaccine. And if you're going to actually fire an employee for not taking vaccines or hold him or her accountable for the wellness of other employees, that may not fly off very well from an employment law perspective.
And Veena, just to take off from what you said, another thing which an employer should be considerate of or be mindful of is that in mandating a vaccine, the employer also takes on a certain level of risk. Say the vaccine, someone has an adverse effect to the vaccine, then there may be potential for the employee to claim say compensation, or it's just a messy affair for the employer. So like I said, the employer would have to take a very balanced approach to see whom they're mandating the vaccine for. Is there really a necessity for the employee to return to work? Can this work be done from home? If the employer refuses the vaccine, can you afford a little bit of flexibility? So these are some things that the employer should necessarily be mindful of.
Thank you, Nishant. Divya, I'm going to ask you next, and there is one of our participants who also asked you specifically to share your experience when your organization asked for employees to take flu shots. So if you could talk about that, and what are your plans in terms of the COVID vaccine itself?
So for sure, I think we have a two-pronged strategy in mind at this point in time, and it's evolving as we speak, right? So one is, of course, around awareness building. So we're really working on raising levels of awareness around vaccines. So, a lot of, for example, employees who are getting the vaccine, and this is obviously not yet in India, but in many other parts of our company across the world, employees have started getting the vaccine. So we've started, having interviews with them to talk about, why did you choose to take the vaccine? What was your experience? So basically, and of course, the regular, lots of material which we're sharing in different ways with our employees on the advantages, or why would somebody take the vaccine, blah blah blah. So communication and awareness, I think, is really important for us as an organization. It's something I personally believe is very important. Because certainly, at this point in time, at least, I don't think the way I would approach it would be that we would want to mandate something like this. So I think it's really important for employees to feel like they would like to take this vaccine. It is going to make them safer, and their families safer, all of that. So that's one part of our vaccine strategy. The other part, of course, as I said, is still evolving. We've been talking to our healthcare partners to see what kind of options we could have as a company to prioritize our population. Again, voluntarily, but how do we prioritize? How do we sort of make these vaccines available? Very large, or most of our workforce would be less than 45, right? So for sure, that's something that we and we still don't have that clarity. I would love to hear if somebody else has more clarity on that. Our healthcare partners are all sort of, it's all fluid, and we're working on this. Next 2-3 weeks, we should know whether there are some viable options. The third aspect is going to be cost, of course, and there is a very serious conversation around at least this first year Do we want to pay for this? Do we want to fund this for our employees? And I think, while I can't say that we've decided that we're going to do it because we don't know what the numbers are right now. But I think that is again going to be an important part of our strategy. So why will we will not mandate, but we will make it really easy for people in the sense that, if we can fund it, then I think that really encourages employees to avail it. So that's really our thinking around the COVID vaccine. And like I said, I think this is one space that's evolving for sure. So, if you talk to me 4 weeks from today, I'm sure I'll have, much more detail around this. To answer your question on the flu vaccine, so we had again, very sort of, I would say, again, it was a two-pronged strategy. We worked a lot on our communication around the flu vaccine. Flu vaccine, we found just, that it's just not prevalent in India. People just don't. I had very senior stakeholders say, what is this? I've never heard of it. My family has never taken it. Why would we want to take it? So we did a lot of awareness building to talk about how, about why flu vaccine is a good idea, especially in this period when there's so much panic. If nothing else, it alleviates stress, right? That, you're not getting the flu, every time, and then you're running to get a test and all of that. So, like I said, a lot of focus on awareness building, through our leaders, through all our forums, different, all the usual communication tools. We also really made it easy for employees to get the vaccine. So remember, this is, height of pandemic that we're talking about. We're talking about the months of August, September, October, November, when we ran this whole sort of, program. So what we did is we tied up with a sort of a healthcare partner to actually make it available at home also as an option. So you could choose to go to a clinic and get it done, a partner clinic, or you could opt to ask them to come home and vaccinate not just you, but any number of people in your family. So really, and we found that that's what really caused I think, a much higher usage, because, it was really easy for people to say, okay, I'm not going to get out during this pandemic. I'm certainly not going to go to a, clinic or whatever, but I'm happy if someone comes home and gives it to me and my family. And the third thing that we did is we paid for it for the employee. We did not pay for families, of course, but we did pay for it for employees. Obviously, it's a one-time thing. It was, for this period, this pandemic period, where stress levels were just so high, and we wanted to do this. And we felt that it will also really increase, because people will take it. They will also learn that it is safe, it's useful, it's good, because you don't really get this usual flu, cold, cough, all of that. So the communication and it's going to just kind of increase that immensely, right? People experiencing it for themselves. So that was really the three things that we did to roll out our flu vaccine. In spite of all of that, I will say that we had probably maybe about 62-63% of our workforce that took it. Of course, very high percentages, 95% at places like our manufacturing plants, because it was just so simple. Somebody came into the site and, we could cover everybody. Dekha daki, I'm seeing my colleagues are all going for it. Let's just get it done, all of that. But probably lower for employees who were at home. So yeah, that's been our experience with the flu vaccine.
Thank you so much, Divya. And I think this whole communication conversation piece is most important. And I think 4 weeks from now, we want to be speaking to organizations to hear how things have evolved, how things have changed, because we're all looking to each other for guidance, for information, for support. Because there is, and legitimate information is very, very difficult to source. There is all sorts of information on WhatsApp and all sorts of details on even news channels these days. So to have somebody give you their lived realities, their experienced learning, that thing is absolutely valuable. And I'm so glad. And thank you so much for being part of this webinar and sharing this information with us. Augie, what are your thoughts on the vaccination piece itself?
Let me try to look at it this way. I think the easiest thing to do would be to say, okay, this is the government mandate, and therefore, you've got to make it, optional to people. Okay, let it be voluntary. Let's look at it practically from a business standpoint. All right. You have somebody going to a client site, and that client site mandates it. What are you going to do? All right. So this employee then refuses. So then what do? Do you take disciplinary action because the person refuses to go and does the work that is assigned to him? So will you take action that it's an assignment refusal, as against saying that you didn't take a vaccine? See, there are going to be a lot of such challenges. And also those, who are going to refuse the vaccine, I think they will also be limiting career progression for some time, because there could be opportunities for you to go and do that work only if you're vaccinated. So if you're not able to do that work, you're limiting your progress. So I think it's a very case by case basis, but you can always say that, look, it's voluntary, but when it comes to actual deployment of resources at various offices or sites and client locations, it will be a call that you will take one-on-one with your manager or somebody like that. And top of it, of course, is the awareness and the reassurance of doing this whole thing. So I would say overall, make it voluntary, but at the same time, make it clear to people that we will do a one-on-one when there is a very specific requirement for you to have this. Thank you.
Thank you, Augie. And Rupa, I think it's a very important piece from a mental health perspective as well, because there is so much information, misinformation everywhere, and taking the vaccine also means taking a call on your health and wellness. Not taking a vaccine, like Augie said, would mean missing the bus on several opportunities. So these things do have an impact. And how do you think organizations can help from a counseling, wellness, mental health perspective?
Right. I think one of the important thing about the vaccination anxiety is something that keeps coming up, and that is in conversation right now. And providing resources, right? Providing valid information, finding out resources that are not just from social media, not myths from people, and things like that will be very helpful. The other thing that's also coming to my mind as I heard the others and their perspective on the vaccination is to do like a functional analysis, like a needs assessment sort of a survey to find out what are your employees thinking about the vaccination? What are some of the anxieties that they are presenting? What are some of these concerns that they have with respect to, is my career going to grow because of the vaccination and I'll be able to go to these meetings or meet these clients? Or what are my other anxieties related to other health issues that I've had probably when I've taken a vaccination before? So also being more empathic and having a more feeling based approach to it rather than a problem solving based approach to it might be helpful. Like hearing from them about what their anxieties are, how these anxieties can be addressed, what would be most helpful for them to get their questions answered. And I think that might be a good background work to be done by organizations rather than thinking about how can we get this moving, how can we make sure most of them get vaccinated, etc., etc. So I think that was something that I wanted to contribute to this conversation with.
Thank you, Rupa. I think net it is these things are going to evolve. We're going to see how employees react to the vaccination drive itself, how they whether and how there is some kind of faith established in the system. And I think once the one batch of vaccination is done, everyone will have a lot more faith in that, and things will pan out on its own. But the conversation, like we all agreed before, has to continue. It's important to share information. We have a couple of questions, so you could look at the chat box. This is the panelists, and I'd also request you to take the last minute. Maybe, yeah, we have 4 more minutes to go. So if each of you could just take a minute to give your last thoughts, and maybe that could be one important thing that you believe organizations should focus on for the next 6 months. And the next 6 months is crucial for opening their doors and getting back to work, to the workplace.
So one thing that I haven't talked about at all is working from home and supporting employees to work from home. Okay, so I think that's something that that employers, especially in the next few months, till the vaccine really comes in and you're really bringing people into work. I think that's something that's really important. We've actually looked at unique ways of supporting employees. For example, we've actually said we'll reimburse UPS kind of support if required, and so there's apart from the usual broadband install, broadband monthly, all of that. So I think that's one thing that probably we didn't talk about at all, but I think really ensuring, and I think Augie talked a little bit about how do you help people make sure that their home is has appropriate sort of expectations, etc. So without taking too much of time, I think that's one aspect that we must also consider.
I fully agree, because if you want employees to work from home, that support as an employer is critical. Rupa, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think the one thing that I would want organizations to take away is to not take their employees' resilience for granted, and having a more human approach to, even conversations, trying and being vulnerable themselves, so that their employees can see that as a model to explore their own vulnerabilities and talk about how this pandemic period has been there for them and talk about their anxieties.
Super. Thank you so much for that. Augie?
Yeah, let me quickly take a 30-second stab at those two questions. The one from Raju Bhatnagar, asks whether, employee wellness, do you see this being extended to employee wellness? I think we're already seeing that, adopted by large companies, but I think there's a lot more to be done in the small and medium industry space, which has been badly hit also by the pandemic. So I suppose it's got to be across the board, but it's work in progress. Thanks. That's a good question. Then in terms of higher flexibility and acceptability to work from home, we were talking about the real estate playing out. If I look at specificities, yes, I think some organizations definitely have reduced their real estate footprint. But if you look at where the workforce is heading, we are working towards a hybrid work environment, okay? So which means that while you may not have so many glitzy offices all in one place in an IT park, you will have something coming up a kilometer or two closer to home, all right? So hybrid workspaces, or workplace hubs are, again, part of the new ways of working and the future of work. So if you look at that, I don't see, real reduction, in terms of work or commercial workspace, But we'll have to see that. It's a call, and it could be very sector specific. Raju, I feel, like IT sector could probably see gains in that space, but some other industrial manufacturing sector may not be able to do that. So it's going to be very sector specific. Thank you. That's a very nice question. The other one was from Anusha Kondati. Can you tell us about people traveling to work in public transport? Is there anything org mandate to offer on transportation? See, I think one thing when you go on to public transport, I'm not sure, maybe they ask for your Arogya Setu status. Okay. If they do, that's a good thing. But I would say that, you need to make sure that those coming in from containment zones are not allowed. If you're in a containment zone, you probably have to be contained there, all right? And therefore, your access itself to the organization should be denied or restricted. So that is one control that you could put in there. And then I think it's definitely an employer responsibility to bring people and go if they don't have dedicated transport. But if they're using public transport, I think greater levels of safety and advice to please take the vaccine that could save you as well as your family because you're going back home. Okay, so that's very important. So the awareness question once again comes up there. So thank you. With that, I think we are past the clock on that, Veena. Back to you.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we'll just take closing comments from Nishant, and then we'll just wrap up.
Thank you, Veena. So, a lot has been said, so I really don't have too much to add. But if there's one takeaway which I would think employers should keep in mind is that I would think they shouldn't take any hasty or knee-jerk reactions to either say returning to work or determining whether they continue to work from home. I think things are evolving. The virus is evolving. The way people handle it is evolving. Definitely, social distancing and things like that have become more habit than it was before. So I would say that employers should take it step by step, see the actual requirement to return to work, understand the government regulations around it, see if it works for them, and then require employees to to return to work. And for those who can't, try and accommodate as far as possible.
Thank you. This has been really useful, and I'm extremely grateful to all our panelists who have shared such valuable information over the last 1.5 hours. And thank you so much, BCIC, for actually providing a platform to have such conversations. And net, I think the only way to figure this out is to share more information, to share opinions, share experiences, and that's how we all learn and grow. So thank you so much for providing this platform. And Ogi, are we having a vote of thanks?
Thank you so much, Veena. And yes, it was a very interesting session. And thank you. Those questions were very deep and insightful. The audience questions were bang on. So I think I truly enjoyed and am enriched by what we have done here. But I think we should continue the conversation offline too. If anybody would like to contact any of the panelists or Veena or myself, feel free to do that or write to the secretariat. They'll be happy to help you. And, I have to express my gratitude, of course, to Veena, who's a very active member of our Women's Empowerment and Leadership and HR Committee. So thank you so much, Veena, for putting all your efforts along with Nishant, to curate this whole thing, which hasn't been easy. This is not a topic that a lot of people have been able to address, but I think the chamber took this upon itself because this was right there in the front burner, and we said we have to talk about this to our members and equip them in the return to workplace, return to profit, and return back to business, right? So with that, thank you, Dr. Rupa Kalahasti, for all your inputs. We truly appreciate that. Rupal Sinha, I don't see her, but nevertheless, thank you very much, Rupal. And Nishant, needless to say, your legal perspective was truly helpful to all of us. And Divya, thank you once again, for bringing those real life situations and sharing your workplace practices out here. So with that, I also want to say that this program is recorded and the recording will be available for those of you who would want it. Please write to the secretariat. They'll be happy to do it, or it will be posted on our YouTube link of BCIC. And as a token of our gratitude, we would like to give you some mementos, and we will post it here on this screen. But nevertheless, it will reach your home or office, wherever it is, and the secretariat will reach it to you. And there you go. With that, I have to express my sincere appreciation to Rupa, Prithvi, from the Secretariat, as well as Nandini and Sham for their support in providing all administrative activities and follow-throughs for this program. And last but not least, our own leadership, President Mr. Parasuraman, as well as the Senior Vice President Sekhar and Dr. Ravindran, who probably I'm not able to see. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to bring this to our fraternity, sir, and we are truly indebted to you. And we'll continue to bring in groundbreaking discussions and difficult to understand issues onto a table so that we go back more educated and enriched as a chamber. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Augustus, and thanks the team. Wonderful. I was just listening the complete thing. Great value-adding event, and thank you all for
Welcome, sir.
really enriching us at the right time. Thank you. God bless. God bless.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.